Hey, it's Scott Petrak with another episode of the Brown Zone Coverage Podcast. The end is near. The Browns season concludes Saturday in Baltimore. They lost the home finale last week to drop to 3-13 overall and 2-6 at Huntington Bank Field. Dorian Thompson-Robinson was bad again in his second straight start at quarterback, and the offense continued to regress. To the point, Coach Kevin Stefanski is considering using two quarterbacks against the Ravens. On the bright side, the Browns had three players picked as Pro Bowlers. Here to discuss, as always, it's Dave Chudowsky of Go, the WKYC Morning News. What is going on, Chud?
Scott, Happy New Year. How are you?
Happy New Year to you. I'm pretty good, bud.
Thanks. I really enjoy this time of year. I'm not going to lie to you. A lot of people get upset. It's January. I kind of like the reset, man. You get back in to the workouts. Not that I ever really stop totally, but, you eat a lot during the holidays. And I like the reset. And the other thing, too, is I am ready for the regular season to be over. And I love the NFL playoffs. I love it. I mean, I am not afraid of January. Bring January on.
I love that attitude, Chud. Yeah, I'm fine with January. I do need to. My workout schedule has not been as steady as yours. I need to get back on that, so I'm looking forward to kickstarting that with the end of the season, give myself some more free time. But you're right about the playoffs, and we do these pods throughout the playoffs. We do our picks. I love the NFL playoffs. I really do.
Yeah, it is. It is exciting. Before we get to everything else, let's just hit some news that just came out this morning. We're taping this on Thursday morning. The Pro Bowl announcements.
Yeah. So we got Myles Garrett, Jerry Jeudy as starters. Denzel Ward is a Pro Bowler, but a backup. And then they had six alternates. Joe Bitonio, Hunter Corey Bojorquez, Nick Chubb, which is a weird one because he didn't play very much. Wyatt Teller. Oh gosh, I got to look at my list here, Chad. I'm missing two guys. But let me look it up. But yeah, so they had three guys, three main Pro Bowlers, and Myles Garrett, who obviously deserves it. Jerry Jeudy coming off his first 1,000-yard season, or during his first 1,000-yard season. And then Denzel Ward, who is a perennial Pro Bowler and I think has played the best of his career. But yeah, the six alternates: Bitonio, Bojorquez, Chubb, David Njoku, Jeremiah Rusu-Koramoah, who is also on IR, and Wyatt Teller.
Okay, yeah, I couldn't help you out there with the rest because I stopped reading the email after the first three. So, but what about Ward though? I mean, just being hurt all the time. You still think he's deserving with how he played?
Yeah, Chud, I really do. First of all, I don't think he's missed a game this year. I know it sounds like he's hurt a lot, and
True.
Sounds like he's hurt a lot, but he's in and out of the lineup. He's dealt with concussions. But I'll tell you what, Chud, I think he has played an extremely high level. He's played every game this year. Leads the league with 19 passes defense, has 2 interceptions. And there was a change in Denzel, and we might have talked about this months ago. In the offseason, he showed up for all the offseason workouts, and he's the guy that doesn't need to do that. He was there for all of them, and it was a concerted effort on his part to be more of a leader, to take on a bigger role. He was voted captain. He had Martin Emerson Jr. live with him in Miami in the offseason so they could train together. He offered that to all the young guys at his position. So, and then I thought that carried over to the regular season. I think he's played really well. I think he's played better than he ever has. And to me, he's a top, 3 corner in this league. So the Pro Bowl is, in my opinion, richly deserved. And I'm a little bit surprised he wasn't picked as a starter.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Good points. Good points. Can't argue that. That's why you're the man. Scott, going back to the game, and we have a lot of other things to get to away from the game, but I actually went as a fan. My daughter, I don't know if I told you this last week, my daughter won free tickets for perfect attendance.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah, we didn't talk about it, but I saw the picture. That's awesome.
Yeah, she does really well in school, good grades, perfect attendance. Program the Browns do at many schools, and I think it's a great program. And I'm a big believer in just showing up. Joe Thomas has always talked about that. Just being there is half the battle.
Yep.
So I think it's very important to teach kids to be there. And I think that's awesome. The Browns recognize that. So that was a lot of fun. I'm not going to lie. If I had, paid for the tickets, I would be annoyed. I probably wouldn't have chose to go to the game last minute at the end of the year. But I will say the weather wasn't that terrible. It rained, but it was warm. And you know what? My family had a blast. Just going to an NFL game is great. But I started thinking about it. The daughter who won the tickets isn't really that much into football, but my other daughter is, and she was excited. She kept talking about how it's Myles Garrett's birthday, and she just loves watching the NFL live. She loves seeing it. And I think back to when I was a kid, how cool that is to always watch it on TV, but then to go see it. And I took her to we went to a couple games this year. But then she made a good point, and her and I were talking, and I'm like, we only had one play to really celebrate, and that was Myles Garrett's sack. I mean, You're not going to, all right, so we clapped over the field goal. But I guess my point is, man, they lose so many young fans because, they want to see excitement and they want to see things, and it's just generations lost. And I'll make sure my daughter stays a Browns fan, and I know so many fans do. But it just hit me about, like, how so many Browns games, and you really got to bottle up like that Steelers game and how big that was, because there's just so many home games where you just don't get the excitement. Sure, it's exciting to be in an NFL game. And Myles Garrett said it the other day too, and I appreciate this. He's like, every week they ask him, what are you playing for? And he always has to come up with something different. And this week he's like, hey, you never know what kid might be inspired by how I play. And that really resonated with me. I know I went on too long here. That's a lot to take in, but I just had to share that with you.
No, I appreciate that. And I mean, there's so much there. You're right. The NFL games are cool. I get a little spoiled because I get to go to so many of them, and I get to sit inside and not get wet or cold. Not too cold, at least. It was cold walking to my car on the lake though after that game. But yeah, they're cool. But I mean, you're right. The good times have just been too few and far between. And we've talked about that a million times. And last year feels like a million years ago, even though they won 11 games and they scored a bunch of points. And a year ago, Sunday, December 29th, was when Flacco beat the Jets. It wasn't just Flacco, but Joe Flacco and the Browns beat the Jets on that Thursday night to clinch a playoff spot. So much changed in that 1 year to now they're 3-13, and you don't know what the direction the franchise is headed in. And it was only a year ago where I think young people were enthused, but that fades, and all of a sudden you're talking about all the bad years, and this is the worst year since they went winless in 2017. So I get it, and you're completely right about the offensive part of it. And bottom line, if you win, you win. If you lose, you lose. But if you're scoring 3 points, that's hard to watch. And the week before, they scored 6 points. The week before, they scored 7 points. So they've scored 2 touchdowns in the last 3 games. They've only scored 20 points 3 times this year. And when we do the autopsy on this season, right, the terrible offense is at the top of the list of whatever issues, right? That's the biggest cause of death to extend this terrible metaphor. But it's not only that it sabotaged the season because they couldn't score any points. It made for a really difficult season to watch. And my buddies text every Sunday. There's a chat, and it's how tough it is to watch because they can't score points, which is why I think people got probably overly excited in hindsight about Jameis Winston when he played those 7 games, because at least they move the ball. And I think you would take that, especially as a fan, maybe not as a coach watching 8 interceptions in 3 games, but you would take moving the ball and scoring points. It's better to lose 27-21 than 20-3. I think it just is. It's more exciting. There's life there, and it's hard to generate any life, any enthusiasm when you score 1 field goal.
Yeah, no doubt. One of the top things I want to say right out of the top here is I'm starting to rethink. I think back to when we talk about how DTR, you've mentioned it, we've mentioned it, that, he is a quarterback in the NFL, meaning, he deserves to be in the NFL. Scott, I got to be honest, after watching the last 2 weeks, I don't even know if I'm comfortable with him being the backup. Like, if your starting quarterback goes down and you got to come in and bring DTR in, I don't know if I'm comfortable with him as the Browns' backup quarterback moving forward.
Yeah, Judd, I completely agree with you. Now, I think there's a difference between does he have a place in the NFL and are you comfortable with him being the number two quarterback? Because most teams keep three quarterbacks. Now the Browns have started to keep three quarterbacks. They have three quarterbacks on the roster now. And he's a smart guy. He's got really good athleticism, which should help him stick around. You see guys hang around in this league a long time that can do a little bit here, a little bit there. Joshua Dobbs, I think they're similar style quarterbacks, and he got better as he went along. He's going to start the finale for the 49ers. Like, you don't want him to be your starter, but can you play a couple games with him? Yes. Now, DTR is not at that point where you can't play a couple games with him and expect to win, at least how he's playing now. So I don't think his spot on this roster next year is guaranteed. I would assume they bring him back, like, keep him on the roster. He's under contract. He's their draft pick 2 years ago. I think he stays with them all off season. I think he comes into training camp, but I don't think there's any guarantee that he's on the roster next year. And I'm with you, Chud. I think there's at least it's not just the last two games. I mean, we've seen him for 2 years, off and on. There's a lot of deficiencies there, and two that jumped out to me during that Dolphins game were the intentional groundings. And he took three of them, and he's got four over the last 2 weeks. He leads the league in intentional groundings. He started two games. There's a lack of awareness there, whether it's not recognizing the blitz or the pressure, it's not knowing where your outlets are. And it's true, an intentional grounding isn't any worse than a sack. Um, they're both lost it down, the ball goes where it is. But it's a lack of awareness. And he said, like you said, we're taping this Thursday morning. On Wednesday, he said he needs to know the rules better about the intentional grounding, and that's troubling. And then the second part is, he's got a pretty big arm, and I don't think it's a huge arm, but like if he's got a good platform, he can rip it. And you see him, in fact, throw it too hard sometimes. He doesn't have great touch. Well, also on those second level, like a guy run a deep over, or you got to hit that whole shot between the corner and the safety, and you need to loft it over the linebacker. I don't see any of that. All I see is line drives. And I think that limits what he can do. It limits his effectiveness. It limits his accuracy, which hasn't been very good. So there's a lot of flaws that he's going to have to figure out.
I didn't listen to everything he had to say this past week, but I did catch something along the lines of, he felt like he did everything that was asked of him. Is that, did I hear that right?
Yeah, yeah. That's not the quote, I don't think, but you're real close paraphrasing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then there was a follow-up. Like, so you thought you played pretty well kind of thing? And he said, yeah. And there were a lot of references to it takes all, he said 10 guys. I assume he meant 10 guys besides himself. To run it to run the offense effectively and for a play to work. And while that's true, I don't like that I don't like that approach from my quarterback. I want it to be, it was my fault, it was my fault, it was my fault. And I thought it was plenty of his fault, Like on one of the intentional groundings, running back Pierre Strong Jr. goes the wrong way. And it's a screen set up to the right. It's set up. DTR throws it over there. Strong is running the screen to the wrong side by himself. Well, that's not on DTR. And that intentional grounding shouldn't be on DTR. The other two should have been. That one shouldn't have been. It's not his fault. That is on Strong. Okay. But there's other plays. The interception is on DTR. He didn't recognize that the linebacker dropped because the running back got caught up behind the line of scrimmage. You can't do that. He had a fumble he had a strip sack in the pocket where he loses control of the ball. That's him. He misses throws. Yes, Jerry Jeudy dropped a couple passes. Overall, I thought DTR was the biggest problem with that offense. And for him to say that he thought he did his job on just about every play, to me, it felt like a little bit of a lack of accountability. And I get he's reeling. He probably sees his career. This feels like a crossroads for him. I just didn't love his answers after the game.
Yeah. Well, let's turn to the guy that continues to get it done, and Myles Garrett gets the sack, ties for the NFL lead, right?
Yeah, he got two. He had two
Yeah, he
sacks.
got two.
Yeah, so he's
Yeah.
up to 14. Um, in a season, in a finale with, nothing, not much to watch or, relatively meaningless from a Browns perspective. I think that adds some juice to it, at least for me. Um, he's never led the NFL in sacks. He's got a chance. He's tied with Trey Hendrickson of Cincinnati. Cincinnati plays right after the Browns on Saturday, so we'll get to see those guys. It won't be decided Saturday because there's a couple guys, um, two sacks behind, so you have to watch the entire slate play out Sunday. But if Myles let's say he gets two sacks, and Hendrickson doesn't, and all of a sudden Myles has 16 and he's four up going into Sunday, you got to like his chances. So obviously Lamar Jackson's tough to sack. Um, Baltimore could decide to run it 50 times, which would decrease Myles' opportunities for a sack. But whether he wins a sack title or not, he's had a phenomenal season. I think it's as good or better than his NFL Defensive Player of the Year season a year ago. He's played at an extremely high level. They've been in bad situations. They haven't had the lead, so he hasn't had a chance to just pin his ears back. He leads the league with 21 tackles for loss. He's playing an incredible level, and I think people do, but I think even if they do, I think people need to recognize how well he's playing. He's probably not going to win DPOY again, but he should be in the top two or three because he's played that well, even though the Browns are 3-13.
Yeah. First player in NFL history to record at least 14 sacks in 4 consecutive seasons, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
yes, he's the youngest to 100, first to do it under 29. And I have to say this caveat every time. The sack didn't become official until 1982. So we're not counting the Deacon Jones of the world and, those guys. But since 1982, which is a long time now, he's the first to do it, the first to do the 14 sacks in 4 straight seasons. Him and LT, Lawrence Taylor, are the only ones to have 12 sacks in 5 straight seasons. And obviously LT is arguably the best pass rusher ever, edge rusher. So, yeah, I mean, every week there's something new with Myles, some great milestone, and he deserves all the recognition he gets. He's headed back to the Pro Bowl. He deserves it. He should be an All-Pro. He won. We voted as a local Pro Football Writers of America chapter. He won the MVP, which is called the Joe Thomas Award. He won it again. I think it's the fourth time he's won it, back-to-back years. Um, he's just having another incredible season, despite how bad the team is, and despite dealing with a bunch of injuries. He hasn't practiced this week with a thigh injury. I expect him to play Saturday anyway. That's just who he's been all year long and really for the past several years.
I was just going to mention that you guys, Garrett and your boy Batonio getting awards from the writers.
Yeah, Joe Batonio won the Good Guy Award, which is named after Dino Lucarelli. He was a former Browns PR guy. Before my time, although in a strange coincidence, I used to hang out with Dino's son, Joe Lucarelli, before I started doing this. But yeah, so Joe Batonio's a good guy. It's the guy who cooperates with the media. He carries himself well with teammates in the community. Batonio's won it 5 times. I think it's 5. Nobody else. Joe Thomas won it twice. He's the only other multiple-time guy. Batonio's fantastic. There's other good guys in there. 7 guys got votes. But Joe is just phenomenal. He's always been phenomenal. And if this turns out to be his last year, he's considering retirement. I personally felt that you had to send him out with one because he's been so good throughout his career.
Yeah. Real quick, you asked about long-term issues with said Tillman. Is there concern with him? He got put on the IR.
Yeah, Kevin Stefanski said no. He expects him to be ready to roll. It's just unusual to miss the last 6 games with the concussion. It's not unprecedented. It's just unusual. And we talked about it. He was practicing lightly, no contact. But usually when you see a guy practicing and running around, it's days before he comes back, not weeks. And then they shut him down. But no, Stefanski says he'll be ready to roll. But it's one of those things, in a lost season, all kinds of bad stuff happens. And, there's a cause and effect there. Sometimes they're not. But this is one of the things where you look back from an organizational standpoint, let's assume he's fine. And The concussion is not going to linger, and he's back to normal next year, or hopefully like tomorrow. From a strictly football perspective, he'd started to come on when Amari Cooper gets traded. There's a quarterback change. All of a sudden, Sid Tillman started to catch a bunch of balls, and from an organizational standpoint, they wanted to see him for those last 6 weeks, see if that was legitimate, see if he could sustain it. And actually, DTR would have, I'm sure, played better because him and Tillman, they were high school teammates, and I think that would have helped DTR's success rate. But now you just have this tiny window of Tillman this season, and I think he showed enough where you can say, yeah, I know he's an NFL player. Is he a number 3 receiver? Is he a number 4 receiver? I think the sample size is too small to really say. And in a position where they need reinforcements, the organization's going to have to factor that in, and they don't have a big enough sample size.
A couple things from the week, some stories, just kind of, and I know we don't have a lot of time. It could get long-winded here, but just Deshaun Watson, the contract restructure. Gotta hit that.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. It was last Friday, right? News dump. It doesn't. Here's the key points. Doesn't change the $46 million is guaranteed in each of the next 2 years. Doesn't change the $73 million cap hit in each of the next 2 years. What it does do is it gives the Browns more flexibility at the back end of the contract. If Watson is on the roster for the next 2 years, if he completes that 5-year contract, and then he becomes a free agent, or they cut him because there's void years added to the contract. So whatever those maneuverings are, and he completes the 5 years here, then they can spread out those cap hits that he has left. There's dead money after the contract expires. They can spread that out over more years. So they gave themselves flexibility. It doesn't mean they can't cut him. It doesn't mean that he has to be here for the next 2 years. It raises the likelihood that he will be. It feels like it almost guarantees that he'll be here in 2025. Not necessarily, but we knew that anyway because they would have to take a $119 million cap hit if they cut him with the post-June 1st designation. So the assumption was always that he was going to be on the roster. We need to see his health. We need to see what that looks like. But they're not going to cut him anytime soon. And so in some sense, it's kind of a big deal that they're restructuring his contract, but it doesn't change the major things. So it's interesting. I didn't think it was a huge deal. Obviously, you have to write about it, but it didn't strike me as, oh my God, this is breaking news. The next question is, how do they handle the quarterback situation? We'll have plenty of time to talk about that, but where does he fit in this mix? Is he competing for a job? Is he the backup? Is he healthy? All those things will be decided later. We'll talk to Andrew Berry next week as the plan. But it all signs point to him being on this team in 2025, and then they'll figure everything out after.
But I know some people were concerned. I heard that they were adding years on to his contract. That is not the case.
No, those are void years. They're just, it's just a financial maneuvering.
He can still be gone after 2 years.
Yeah, he's not under contract past 2026. Those are void. Right. Those are just years that they can void, and it's all salary cap gymnastics.
What they were doing was helping themselves out, basically.
Yes, they're giving themselves a chance to be more flexible, have more salary cap flexibility. Now, I will say that next year, once the new league year starts, which they've done in the past 2 or 3 years with Watson, they can restructure that 2025 contract and slide a bunch of the money forward, give him cash, and then they can move more of that money more of that salary cap money into the future. So we could see that, and Andrew Berry continues to say that they'll have enough salary cap space to make all the roster moves necessary. That would help them. And again, it's just kicking money down the road, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him get a bunch of cash in March or April or May, June, whenever it happens, and then that frees up some more salary cap space for 2025.
You want to hit on the stadium issue with Art Modell quickly, the Art Modell Law?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's newsworthy the city's taking a stand. But the Browns had, like a month and a half ago, went to court to try to get verification on the Modell Law anyway. So this was we were going to have the courts involved because the Browns kind of tried to jump in front of the city. So I think it's ugly what's going on between the city and the team. I don't know if it's necessary. I'm sure a lot of it is politics and posturing for your constituents, and I get that. I would love to see the city. I mean, the team's going to Brook Park. I think we know that. I don't think the Modell Law is going to keep them from going to Brook Park. I read the Browns lawsuit. The law feels pretty flimsy. Like there's not a lot of specifics in it. I get why it was put in place in the late 1990s, so you could have some, hey, then nobody's going to move again. I don't know if it has any teeth to it. I think the Browns are going to go to Brook Park. Like I'm almost 100% sure they're going to go to Brook Park. And I just think they need to find a way to make the city as whole as possible and help with the teardown of the stadium and the development of the lakefront. And I know there's a willingness to do that. I just hope the banter from both sides that's gotten, pretty publicly hostile. I hope that doesn't affect what the city can do when the Browns leave, and I hope the Browns try to help the city out.
Yeah. All right, Scott, were you surprised that this game, Ravens-Browns, the last game is going to be on Saturday and not Sunday?
Yeah, it's weird, Chud, because the NFL tries to, put the biggest games in prime time. They want you to give where there's something to play for, and obviously the 8 o'clock Cincinnati Pittsburgh game. If Cincinnati wins, it stays in the playoff hunt. So that's an important game for them. Where if Cincinnati played after Denver, because if Denver wins, Cincinnati's done. If Cincinnati played after, then there's no drama for Cincinnati. So there's a lot of machinations that go into the schedule. And by putting the Browns game in the standalone at 4:30 on Saturday, Ravens win, they clinch the division. So there is something to play for. I think there's some juice to that game. Obviously, the Browns are 17.5-point underdog, so it's not supposed to be competitive. But at least there's something to play for, and there's not a whole lot of those games this week. A lot of playoff spots sewn up. You got the big one on Sunday night, Lions, Vikings. But at least there's something to play for, so I think that's why it gets a Saturday nod. Yeah,
a couple of the things I was thinking of, and I haven't looked into this as to why, but stuff like this intrigues me. I was thinking, they do play their division opponents pretty well. They've played well on national TV for the most part. So, maybe there's something like that. But also, too, I was thinking, the Ravens aren't going to get a bye. They're going to have to play the first round. I could see maybe them throwing the Ravens on Saturday and giving them a break and giving them a full week, something along those lines.
Yeah, that's interesting. The same thing with the Steelers, right? The Steelers are not going to have a bye, and they're in the playoffs, and they're going to play the following week, and they're playing Saturday night. So there might be something to that. I think they tried to keep the AFC North on the same day, even though they don't need to be at the same time because, if Baltimore wins, they're in. So it didn't matter what Pittsburgh did. Now, if somehow the Browns manage to win, that Pittsburgh game gets a lot more juice after, Saturday night because then the Steelers would win the division with the win. But I think the league probably recognizes that the Browns aren't going to beat Baltimore. So if they didn't need to be at the same time,
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. You think Hard Knocks has anything to do with it?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think part of it could also be that, both the Steelers and the Ravens played on Christmas. So it's not a short week for them, which, I think you try to decrease as many short weeks as possible. And actually, it's a longer week for them coming off the 3 games in 11 days. So I don't know. It's interesting that we're going to see the, AFC North wrap up the regular season Saturday.
Yeah, that's true. Boy, I got to tell you, the Giants. How about the Giants beating the Colts? So, the Colts, what are they doing? And then the Giants totally messing up their draft situation.
Yeah, it's crazy. And obviously, it affects the Browns. And now the Browns are slated to pick third behind New England and Tennessee. And New England's playing. I'm glad you brought this up, Chud. New England's playing a Buffalo team that's going to rest, I would assume, rest its starters or most of the game. I think the coach said that Josh Allen's going to play a very, very little bit. So New England's playing a team resting its starters. Tennessee's playing a Houston team that could rest its starters, at least doesn't need to win. So who knows? And the Browns are playing a team that's trying to win. So I think that does help the Browns in their quest to be number one, get the number one pick. I hate draft position talk. I think you got to try to win games. I understand why fans get sucked into it and they hope their team loses. I don't get behind that. I don't think you can from an organization standpoint. Obviously, you got to try to win all the games. But if the Browns lose, which I expect them to lose, that's good for the draft spot. Whether or not there's a quarterback that's any good, whatever, the higher you pick, the better it is. You can package that, you can trade it, whatever. So in a terrible season, I guess I would say that is a bright spot is that the Browns are going to have what would look like, at the worst, the top 3 pick.
Mm-hmm. So how's the quarterback situation going to play out this week? Any idea?
So we said we're taping this Thursday morning. We talked to Kevin Stefanski later this afternoon. I would think he would tell us, but who knows? Maybe he doesn't. I think you're going to see both guys play. I don't think Stefanski says it on Tuesday, like throws that out there if he's not headed toward that. That's not something he would do. So
yeah,
my guess is DTR starts and plays a half, and then Bailey Zappi plays the second half, maybe. I would like to see Bailey Zappi. We talked about DTR so many times. I would like to see Zappi, whether it's a half, for a half or a whole game.
Yeah. All right, ready to get to prediction time?
Yeah, this should not take long.
No, I don't think it will. Not at all. All right. Browns 3-13. Petrak 6-10. Chud 10-6.
I owe you an extra beer, Chud.
Well, you did pick the Browns last week. That didn't help your cause.
No, it did not. I told you I didn't know how they were going to score any points. I thought they'd get 2 defensive touchdowns, and they did not get any defensive touchdowns.
That's true. I'm not going to lie, though. I thought about switching when I saw Tua wasn't playing. Yeah. And then I'm like, well, maybe Scott's right. They're due to win one more game. The defense will come through. But then I didn't switch it because I'm like, DTR's not scoring points, and he didn't.
That's exactly right.
Yep. So I'll go first. I'm not going to really waste a lot of time here. 31-10 Ravens.
Yeah, I'm going 27-10. It puts us right at the number, depending where the number is, point spread wise. I could fully see a scenario where the Ravens get up 17 points and then just hand it off a ton or get Lamar out of the game. I mean, if you think you're going to win the game, you don't want your guys getting hurt. They could go full on substitutions in the second half and keep it from being an incredible, an even bigger blowout, right? If the Ravens played full tilt all game, it could be 45-3. I think it probably doesn't wind up getting to that point. So, yeah, we got a couple blowouts predicted. We'll see if Bailey Zappi can put a touchdown on the board if he plays. So,
any chance they can pull off one of those rare NFL upsets? Kind of like you see them happen. Hey, anything can happen.
Yeah, I don't see it, Chud. I don't see it. Just the Browns aren't scoring any points. They're banged up. We don't know if Denzel Ward's going to play. He said he's going to try, but he's got his shoulder. Dalvin Tomlinson left practice Wednesday. They're beat up. The Ravens got everything to play for. The Ravens look so good on Christmas. I saw that game on Christmas, bits and pieces. We had family over. Then I went to rewatch it last night and just saw the first quarter, and they were dominant. Again, that's a pretty good Houston team. So, no, I don't see upset chances. I just think I think the reality is where the Browns are.
All right. You got to get to practice.
I do have to get to practice. Thanks, as always, Chud. Happy New Year. We'll do this next week. We'll talk about the finale. We'll talk about, I think, with locker clean out, whatever comes of that. I think Andrew Berry, like I mentioned, is supposed to talk. So we'll figure this out, but we'll begin our season wrap-up next week. And thank you, as always, Chud. Thanks, everybody, for listening. This has been another episode of the Zone Coverage Podcast, and you can read all my work at brownzone.com. Thanks.